does by issuing a verdict that sticks in the universe. Justification is what a judge does. He justifies or he condemns. It's an action of a judge. It's not your action. It's his action. You come into his court, guilty or innocent. He listens to the evidence and he pronounces guilty or innocent, justified or condemned. That's God's work. Justification is an act of God, not your act. And it always, in a just court, accords with the truth. Guilty people go to jail in a just court. Innocent people go free. So, justification with a good judge is you get justified if you're just, and you get condemned if you're guilty. That's what a good judge does. That would not be gospel in our case, would it? Every one of us goes into the courtroom of God guilty. Our conscience bears witness to it. The Bible bears witness to it. People around us, if they were honest, would bear witness to it. We deserve not to be pronounced just, but to be pronounced guilty because we are guilty. And clearly that's not the gospel. Rather, the gospel is that the most holy, just, and upright judge that ever has been, is, or ever will be, looks upon me and you and says, not guilty, no condemnation, just. And the question is, how can that possibly be just? And the answer is Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ lived a perfectly just life, fulfilling every requirement of the law that we did not fulfill. And then Jesus Christ, in a magnificent substitutionary way that only a God-man could do, places himself under the wrath of God and bears all the wrath for our failure and endures our punishment. So he provides the righteousness we should have had, and he bears the punishment we should have had. And how do we benefit from that substitution? And the answer is not law. It just rings so clearly in verse 16. We are justified not by any kind of works of the law, but by faith in Jesus Christ. So picture it this way. He's there in the courtroom as our substitute. He's standing before the judge, and the judge watches us make our plea. And this is what you should say if you die tonight and meet God. I am guilty. I have no rights in this courtroom. None. I deserve hell. But Jesus Christ died in my place, provided all the righteousness that you ever dreamed of requiring, Father, and bore my sin, and I'm trusting Him only. He's my only claim, Judge. He's my only claim. He's my only hope. I love this Jesus. I depend on this Jesus. This Jesus is my righteousness. This Jesus is my punishment. That's all I claim. And you know what will happen at that moment? Did happen already if you said that. God said, not guilty. God sees you in His Son. He sees you connected to His Son. That's verse 16. That's the gospel. And oh, how many new, sweet, tender, deep, strong, beautiful, noble, humble, kind, wise, patient, caring, serving attitudes and behaviors flow from this gospel. Just read the second half of all Paul's letters, right? The second half of each letter is, this is the life that flows from the gospel. One of the central cadences, when I think of walking or watching the choir, one of the central cadences in the gospel walk, is the breaking down of ethnic hostilities. It's very close to the center. It really, really dominates the New Testament between Jews and Gentiles. The breaking down of ethnic hostilities. They're all mixed up with religion. I know that. I'm not saying there's a one-to-one correspondence between black, white, or Asian, Hispanic, and Jew-Gentile. But there's enough of an overlap that the meaning can be transferred. The impulse to unity and harmony of those who are believing in Jesus is so strong when the blinders aren't on us. I don't know how they can be there. When the gospel is being faithfully preached, the blinders are taken away, and the breaking down of the things that separate brother from brother in the faith, and the impulse to unity becomes gospel strong. It's in the gospel, this impulse. Let me read you one of the most remarkable places where this is stated besides Galatians 2. Listen to these words from Romans 3:29 and 30. Is God the God of the Jews only? Is He not the God of the Gentiles? That means all the ethnic groups besides Jews. Is He not the God of the Gentiles also? Yes, of the Gentiles also. Since God is one, He will justify the circumcised Jews by faith and the uncircumcised through faith. Do you hear how the doctrine of justification by faith functions? It functions to make all believers profoundly one. The only place where we stand before God is faith before the cross. There is no ethnic claim here. My ethnicity, my intellect, my body, my marriage, my history have zero to do with my claim before God. I have one claim. I believe in Him. And when a black and a white and a yellow and a red and every shade in between says that, every other separator is relativized. It's that massive only, justified by faith only, which removes everything else from the union that we have in the gospel. So, Peter, what happened? What in the world happened, Peter? Let's go to verse 11. But when Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face, because he stood condemned. For before certain men came from James, he was eating with the Gentiles. Good for you, Peter. But when they came, he drew back, separated, segregated himself, fearing the circumcision party. And the rest of the Jews acted hypocritically along with him, so that even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. Maybe I shouldn't be so surprised at what happened in my church 40 years ago, if Barnabas can be led astray. Paul says in verse 14, that is not according to the gospel. He looks at that, Peter eating with Gentiles, experiencing gospel liberty, justification by faith, knit together, hanging out together, relaxing together, eating the same food at the same table, unashamed. That's gospel liberty, that's gospel unity, and something happened. And when Paul sees this, he says, I confronted him to his face. He stood condemned. This is not in step with the gospel. It's not a little minor flaw here. This is not in step with the gospel. What's going on here when Peter backs out of this relationship? He's eating. Don't miss that. He's eating. Didn't say worshiping. He's eating with them. just hanging out. Just